Welcome to Panda Head Studios. Today we are talking about Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion, Season 1.
This is one of my favorite animes of all time.
Absolutely.
Definitely on my top 10. Not even be like I watched it because it was mecha, and like it had giant robots, but the story, the characters, every aspect of it is awesome.
Absolutely. I agree. Definitely into it for the mechas, but the story, the characters kept me interested, and I'm so glad it has a Season 2.
Yeah. And this show is essentially about it follows a main character named Lelouch and his rebellion. And it takes place in an alternate history of the world where North and South America are the superpower called Britannia, which kind of confuses me. And they have occupied, and it takes place in occupied Japan that has recently, relative to the story, fallen to Britannia.
I believe, according to the story, it was 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
And then it's just about Lelouch gets this power from a character called C2, but it's spelled CC.
Yeah, it is spelled CC, but it's always referred to as C2.
Yeah. I just want to make that distinction because I don't know what it means because I'm not like that hardcore into really digging into anything. But anyways, she gives him a power to what's called Geass, and it allows him to give people one command that they have to obey no matter how much it contradicts their personality or general beliefs. And he uses that power as well as his smarts that he'd already been planning on and developing and working on to take over and lead a rebellion against Britannia to ultimately overthrow the Emperor.
Not just overthrow him, kill him.
Yes.
Like, that's Lelouch's ultimate goal, is to kill the Emperor.
And destroy, like, everything about him. That's why Britannia, he embodies Britannia so much, he wants Britannia destroyed.
Yes, and that is because he is one of the sons of the Emperor. His full name is Lelouch v. Britannia. Most people in the show refer to him as Lelouch Lamperouge because he's in hiding. But yeah, that is part of his motive. Like, that's part of why he cares so much about what's going on with Britannia, is because he's part of the nobility. And because he has mommy issues.
Yeah. Some of the first characters you meet are part of this this faction of this overarching rebellion resistance movement that is in occupied Japan. And
which, by the way, because it does actually matter, because it plays a huge part in how people are treated, what people call it. Occupied Japan is now called Area 11, and
all Japanese people are called 11s.
Yes, which is part of the reason why they're trying to, like, outside of the fact that they don't want to be occupied, like, they want their Japanese heritage back. They want to be able to call themselves Japanese, because after Britannia took over, they stuffed out. They attempted to snuff out everything that they could.
It makes sense because of how it works when you're like trying to control people to snuff out any individuality.
Yeah.
And then like the first major faction you meet are these rebels in occupied Japan that are trying to free Japan and restore the identity of the Japanese people. There's two characters you meet, part of this rebellion. Well, the leader of them is named Ogi. And he's an awesome character who is, I feel, a little underdeveloped, but you still get a great sense of who he is, and he just isn't focused on, and I mean, there's only so much room you have for the story.
Well, not just that, but like, this show has a surprisingly large cast of characters that even, like, they don't spend a whole lot of time on every single one, but like the time they do spend on the ones that you do get, like, you do get pretty good development out of everybody.
Oh, even him.
Like, him more so than a couple others. Like, there's only like a few you really don't get good development from, but like, he's definitely one that does.
He's the leader of the resistance movement, but he's clearly in over his head in the sense of thinking so grand. And when Lelouch steps in and like starts giving everyone orders because they're working, he's like, we're totally listening to him, and he's the reason why the rest follows, because he is smart enough to recognize. Because that's the best part of him. It's my favorite character trait is he's without prejudice.
Yeah.
He is totally just trying to accomplish his goal of the noble side of the goal of just restoring their individual identity and freeing themselves from Britannia, because Japan was like one of the last like independent countries in the world.
Yeah, and that's because they have they make a special type of metal called sakuradite, and it's what for a long period of time allowed them to hold out. But Britannia eventually was like, yeah, well, we can just come take it.
And we're going to use giant robots because that's how they were able to overcome Japan. Is they invented these giant robots named called nightmares. The whole found like the giant robots of the show.
Yeah.
And they're awesome, and they're some of my favorite because of how they don't just like walk. They have like these like cool roller skates that can attach to like train tracks and can roll them around on like the streets and stuff.
And what I also really like about these robots, especially, is compared to especially Gundam, for an example, is those like they always have jet boosters to move around quickly. These don't have that. These actually have like little like grappling hooks that are like mounted on their chest plate that they have to like shoot into walls or buildings in order to maneuver around. And you can screw up the maneuvering by like there. I think there's a couple of fight scenes that we see where someone goes to like latch to a wall and someone's just like, "I'm gonna blow up the wall," and then the person can't maneuver that way anymore because well their grappling point is now gone.
Yeah.
So it creates this very unique way of having to fight and combat these nightmares because they have high maneuverability, but if you're smart and can plan things out and set up traps, like you can reduce that mobility to nothing.
That's what's so cool about Ogi too is he has like this really small story arc in the whole overarching show where he finds one of the like lieutenants of the Britannian army.
She's an honored knight, I believe.
Yeah, she's an honored knight, and she's a head honcho, she's totally like filled with malice and hatred for like the Elevens in the sense of just like they're superior. Or Britannians are superior. They need.
Yeah, 11s are worthless.
Yeah.
Is sort of her mindset about everything.
Yeah, and but she gets injured in a battle and loses memory, and Ogi finds her, and because she's so pretty, he is.
Well, no, it's actually not because she's pretty. Well, I mean, that's why he ends up falling for her.
Well, and her
But, like,
vulnerability being so like not.
well, no. Initially, the reason why he decides to save her is because when she's unconscious, she mentions that I can't believe you're Zero. Because
He wants to know who Zero is
because-
the whole show. Yeah.
because although as the viewer, we know Lelouch is the one that's leading the rebellion, but as far as the rebels are concerned, as far as Ogi's concerned, it's his masked figure referred to as Zero. That's what he refers to. Like, so Ogi throughout the whole thing, as much as he's trusting Zero and as much as he's following him, like in the back of his head, he still wants to know who he is. Like, there's a point where, like, there's one moment where they're gonna get like backing from a major organization, and to get that backing, it's like you have to unmask Zero, and Ogi's like, okay. Like he doesn't question it, and obviously Lelouch had figured out that he's gonna have to be unmasked, so he sets up the whole thing, and it's just. But like that's part of what why Ogi saves her though is because she knows who Zero is, and it still eats at him to know.
Yeah, and then he slowly falls for her, and then once she gets her memory back, at a critical point, how like that's one thing that's kind of always stinks about any kind of anime or any story in general is often there's these things that are very convenient to where she suddenly gets her memory back at a very critical part at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And ultimately shoots him and causes some chaos in the ranks amongst other chaos that's created. We'll go into a little later on in the video, and it's actually kind of sad that like you feel like when I first saw that. There's like a little bit of tragedy feel for Ogi because he was like really had actually cared about her and had like developed something, wanted a better world so they could be together because he knew she was Britannia.
Yeah. And it's also really like disheartening because because when he first sees her like at the end of the near the end of the season when she shoots him, like he doesn't know that she got her memory back until he gets shot. So he's like, "What are you doing in this war zone?" Like, because they're in a major battle, and he's like, "It's too dangerous here. Like, I know I lied to you about my job, but we got to get you." And she shoots him, and he's like, "But I thought we were gonna build a better world together, so we can be together." And she's like, "Why would I love a filthy 11?" and like it's just ah
This show just does such a good job with characters. Even her, where she's a throwaway character, even though she's in it from the first episode. She's one of the first people he does Geass to.
yeah. No,
And,
he's not one. Actually, yeah, it is one of because he does it to the guards first.
yeah, and it has them all kill themselves.
Yeah.
The next major character of the resistance movement is Colin, this beautiful red-headed girl who turns out to be half Britannian, half Japanese. And you find out that her mother is actually like a Japanese maid that his father just had a fling with. And she just stuck around while constantly being humiliated by her stepmother and even her until she finally finds out that the whole reason she stayed was so she can be with her daughter, which is like a great, like, just like a shocking moment for her, like, overall.
Well, especially since she finds out because her mother's, they end up having this drug in the world called Refrain, which lets you like relive past memories. And Colin ends up finding her mother in one of these refrain dispensaries, drugged out of her mind, talking about it. Like that's how she finds out. Yeah. It's not through normal through conversation. Yeah. It's her mom being doped out of her mind on Refrain, and then when she finally gets her clean, like her mother's borderline catatonic for like. So not only does she have to deal with the fact that like her mom stuck around and dealt with it like so she could be with her daughter because she loves her daughter and cares for her, but now she can't even like try to build a relationship with her mother anymore because her mother isn't there mentally right now, and it's unclear like the way they explain the side effects and the come down from Refrain is it's unclear whether she'll ever be mentally stable again. She may be basically catatonic for the rest of her life. They don't know because Refrain is such a new product. And I think that's a really like powerful moment for her character, and like you really see it like the way you see her sort of go on from then forward, like in the organization, in what is to be called the Black Knights. Because that's eventually what the organization ends up being called is the Black Knights, and that's actually the moment with her mother is she's part of the Black Knights at that point. Like how she talks, how she acts, how she holds herself changes after that. Like you see her soften up a little bit. She's not so hard as she was beforehand.
And that's like when you first meet her, like all you see is her. She's just piloting like an old nightmare that's still like powerful, and she's just like an expert pilot.
Oh, she's a beast.
And she's just wrecking people, and Lelouch gives her directions, and it like allows her to outmaneuver people, and while assisting her himself, while personally piloting his own nightmare. And eventually, she gets like this upgrade on it. Like she's got this unique red nightmare, which you'd think that anytime that red nightmare showed up, they'd be like, shoot that one the most.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the Millennium Falcon, blow it up.
Yeah.
But anyways, she gets this really cool arm invented by this very like one of my favorite characters, like a mad scientist that
helps the rebel forces.
Yeah, that eventually joins rebel forces, and because she just likes to see her products be tested in live combat. Yeah. Like that's her whole reason. She doesn't care about the rebellion. She doesn't care about Britannia. She just wants to test out her equipment.
Yeah, Rakshasa is so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. And she invents a lot of really cool stuff throughout.
Like, honestly, her and Britannia's mad scientists, I love those characters. And we'll get into Britannia's mad scientists in a little bit, but, like, I love those two characters so much.
Oh, yeah. But she doesn't have too much characterization or development in this season.
In this season, yeah. There are characters that don't get a whole lot of development in this one, but we'll get a lot more in season 2.
But you do get a good sense of who she is. And then eventually Colin, like, it turns out she goes to the same school as Lelouch, because Lelouch is, like, at first living a double life.
Colin's also living a double life.
Colin's living a double life. And she suspects Lelouch is Zero, but Lelouch does something clever and has someone play a record. Like, he basically walks in on her in the shower and then has someone call her that is talking to her as Zero. But they're using a recording, and then she figures out, because that's one thing that always kind of bothered me about the show is, but I understand you got to have this fluffy stuff for people sometimes.
But I will say, like, this show really doesn't have a whole lot of
No.
it. Like, there's, I think, 3 scenes.
And that scene kind of makes sense because he just kind of walks in, and like he's not like, haha, I'm looking, or he doesn't see her naked. He's talking to her through like a shower curtain, and she's
Yeah,
blurred.
and you, like, even as the viewer, you don't see anything of her on that scene either.
Yeah, and like, and it like shows how she's smart, and then eventually it's revealed that she's half Japanese, and they like find out that stuff, and then eventually it gets revealed that she's actually part of the pilot of the Red Nightmare that the Resistance Black Knights have, so she has to go right, and yeah, that's why she has to stop going to school, is because she gets out. And like she's always just Lelouch's most loyal knight. Lelouch, even at Zero, it makes her like her.
Yeah, as the Black Knights are growing, like he ends up having to like sort of reorganize their structure and break down like different command units and things like that. And one of the units he creates is basically Zero's Knights or Zero's guards, essentially, and she's the leader of those. So it's basically his personal guards. Like she's the head of his personal guards. Which, as far as I understand, like the only guard you've ever seen for him is her. So I don't know why he said guards. Technically, she leads a unit, but you only ever see her protect Zero.
And my favorite,
At least directly.
My favorite part about her is the only pilot that really gives her a run for her money. And one of the that's one of the best scenes is when she's fighting the best pilot of one of the best pilots of the Empire, who's piloting this nightmare called Lancelot. Is she grabs she can grab things and like put this with a special arm and put energy into it and cause it to explode. And like they have like this epic duel where they basically both blow up each other's arms.
Yeah. Basically, every one of her fights with him has always ended in a stalemate.
Yeah. And she just, most of the time, she'll just grab people by the face and blow, melt, like melt, it has this really cool melty effect and it explodes.
So moving on from the Black Knights, the next major player, which we've been mentioning a couple times, is Suzaku, who is the pilot of a white nightmare called Lancelot. And he's a honorary Britannian, because he's technically because like the thing with Suzaku is he's actually technically an 11. He is the son of the former prime minister,
the last
prime minister specifically. But he ends up being able to become an honorary Britannian and join the Britannian military, and of course, because he's technically an 11, is discriminated against time and again, and ends up in this research unit that everyone's like, no one really cares about it. Like, it sort of exists because this Earl is weird and likes to do weird things, and so Britannia funds him because he actually makes some nice stuff. So you can go work for them. Like that's really why he ends up there, is because
the Earl spots him because Suzaku is like he's piloting a nightmare, and because of his actions in that nightmare, the Earl of Pudding, one of my favorite characters. He's like Rick if he was more sane and less technologically savvy, but still incredibly technologically savvy. Just not able to like make time machines and understand time and space, all that junk. But anyways, he's the Earl of Pudding, which is like one of my favorite titles. He doesn't care about his nobility at all.
Yeah, you actually don't find out that you don't find out he's an Earl until about the halfway point, I think.
It's a couple episodes after he's introduced.
It's definitely a few episodes after he's introduced, because he's just like this guy named Lloyd that creates nightmares and weird stuff, and then you find out he's an Earl, and it's like, wait a minute, what? And he's just like,
and his main role. His main role in the whole show is to basically be Suzaku, build Suzaku's thing, and to explain the sciencey stuff, to be part of the sciencey explanation. So that's one thing I like, is like they have multiple characters explain like the science behind the nightmares.
Yeah.
But Suzaku, like when he gives Suzaku Lancelot, he slowly upgrades it, and like Suzaku first pilots Lancelot, and that's one of the first hindrances Lelouch has to deal with is the introduction of Suzaku in the Lancelot, and that totally like shatters the morale of Lelouch's forces, and then he just consistently is having really epic fights. Eventually, he pretty much always fighting Colin to a draw, which we mentioned before. And then there's this really awesome episode that really brings this whole character to to who he really is and how much he believes and what he believes and how he sees Lelouch. Because his whole attitude is the reason he has done everything has done is and joined basically betrayed the Japanese people. In the eyes of the 11s, the Japanese people has betrayed them by being the Britannians because he thinks that he can change it from the inside by showing them that there's a better
way, yeah.
Which there's a current show running with the exact same character that is significantly less well liked and enjoyable of a character, but they keep her alive, even though that arc is kind of neat. But anyways, he just how what he does is he's supposed to attack, he gets the opportunity to attack Zero, and he's right up close and personal with Zero, but Zero tricks him, knew this was all, basically lured him in a trap. But it turns out that someone in the background said it was okay that we're just gonna bomb Zero. That's how we're gonna kill Zero. Is we're gonna sacrifice one of our most powerful pieces to take out Zero, which would crumble the resistance. It's a very smart move when you find out who it is, because you don't find out until a little later. It's Lelouch's older brother that's his greatest rival. That's all you really get of his character in this season.
Yeah.
But and Lelouch is forced, and then it turns out Lelouch is forced, and Suzaku knows he's gonna die, and
Suzaku accepts it too.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Suzaku accepts the fact that he is going to die
because he despises what Zero has done because he's basically ruining everything. Another character I just mentioned, but much better done. Is he recognizes that he's ruining everything he's doing, and by making a sacrifice of that nature, it would be probably very smart propaganda wise, and because that's his major character trait is sacrifice for what he sees as the greater good.
Yes,
through the entire series, and then Lelouch has to use his Geass and Suzaku because he's never done that up to that point.
Because he didn't want to. It's his friend. That's the reality is, and what I will say is so much fun about that is Lelouch doesn't find out Suzaku pilots the White Nightmare until episode 17. Until that episode, he has no idea Suzaku's the pilot.
No.
Up until then, he is trying to kill the White Nightmare.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, that's the pilot. Hey, guys, we need to stop trying to kill that. We need to stop trying to kill it and get him to join us instead.
Because he actually wants Suzaku to protect. Lelouch wants him to protect his little sister. But Lelouch gives him one of my favorite Geass Geass effects that he gives to anyone.
Commands.
Geass commands that he gives to anyone, which is live. That's it. That's all it is live. And how it plays out through the entire series, but specifically that part, is then he's seen as he disobeyed orders and all of his actions. And he's like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
It's and it really does stop him from making those. Because Lelouch sees that he knows that Suzaku, because he knows it's his best friend, so he knows Suzaku's going to make those choices. So he's like, nope, you're going to live.
Yep.
Because I care. You're one of the 5 people on this planet I care about.
Not to mention, if Lelouch dies, his whole plan goes up in smoke.
Yeah.
But it's also somewhat selfish of him.
Yes. It's just a great way of helping stop. It's kind of forced growth on Suzaku, but not growth because it's more of a forced action.
It's a forced action more than growth, but it does lead to growth.
Yeah. And then they get trapped on an island, and he finds out that the red pilot is the
Colin. That's where all that drama comes in.
And you get to see her naked.
For 2 seconds.
Yeah, well, he pins her down and her boobies chip. They do this really awesome. Colin and Suzaku have this really awesome philosophical debate after Suzaku just beats her without any effort in regards to physical fighting because he's properly militarily trained in hand-to-hand combat.
Yes, yeah, he actually has hand-to-hand combat training, whereas Colin only has nightmare training.
And she's naked and trying to cover up her boobs when she's attacking him, which is creating more vulnerability because all she's got is this little pocket knife thing that's in her wallet.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense why, because they don't have a proper fight. He counters her stab attempt and throws her down, pins her down, and then
takes her captive, and then they end up with this huge philosophical conversation. which is a lot of fun. Like I love the vast majority of conversations in this are so much fun.
It just shows the dialogue, even though they're having these philosophical debates. It's very personal philosophical debates. It's not like they're trying to like push some message, even though they probably are. But it's not like this is forced exposition. It's a natural debate between two people that would be in that very same situation.
Yeah, because they're talking about like the way the 11s are treated and how they want to be treated, and Colin wants the freedom for the Japanese people, and Britannia won't give it to them. They're just gonna keep beating them down. He's like, well, and Suzaku being who he is, like, well, we need to change it from the inside. Being these rebellions aren't helping. It's just
causing people to die.
It's causing people to die. It's also sort of enforcing that idealism that.
Because the only sacrifice his naive self is willing to make is himself.
Yes.
Because the other people can't make that.
Except that's not entirely true. Because that conversation is the first time we find out what set him on his path.
Yes.
The fact that he killed his own father.
To stop the war, because his father did not want to end the war.
Yeah, that was the big thing, is everyone...
But that's what I mean, is he does sacrifice his own father, but that's kind of why he won't sacrifice anyone else.
Yes.
Which is what's so great, even though it's like, what's so great about it is like you can see on his side, you can stand on his side. I don't personally agree with his side.
No, but...
even though he did save Japan, because Britannia probably would have annihilated them.
Yes. His actions probably did ultimately save the Japanese people to some degree.
Yeah. But it's such a natural development of a character, because once that's known, it's constantly thrown back in his face by the few people who do find that out.
Yeah. There's only one person who never throws it in his face, which is the person he ends up serving under, Euphemia, which is the third princess of Britannia, who really ultimately represents his ideals, like what he really wants. And she's kind of a fun character, because everyone else in this is very like... The vast majority of the characters we meet in the show are battle-hardened. They're driven by anger and rage or even depression, or they have a lot of going on in them that's very dark and not exactly pleasant feeling. But she's actually one of the characters that's not driven. Like she's a happy person. Ultimately, she's ultimately a happy person. And she's ultimately a pleasant person. And she's driven, like, her ultimate goal is just she wants, like, for a long time, she really doesn't know what she wants because she's not given any power. She's not really given choices. Her older sister, Cornelia, who's the viceroy of Japan, or Area 11, really doesn't give her, like, makes her, like,
it makes her assistant, but essentially makes her the political face, while Cornelia is the military. I'm gonna smash you. You step out of line. Here's my iron fist. She's my right hand. That's a soft touch. That is the most heartwarming, charming, beautiful character. As not even in looks, but as like a personality of like just lives in her ideals, and that's why part of the reason why she's so happy is because she is so driven by her ideal world. Yeah,
which is actually kind of interesting because for a long time she doesn't really know what her ideal world is. She wants the war to stop. She does know that. And we get to see her like progress and sort of figure things out.
By going there hands on.
By going there hands on and also like learning, because I mean, and one of her big motivations is outside of learning about the people and what's going on with them is Suzaku eventually confesses to her that he killed his father, and he can't, because she ends up making him her honorary knight, which upsets a lot of Britannians because he's an 11. As great, because an honorary knight's essentially like a personal guard for the royal family. So the fact that she chose an 11, and not someone who's half 11, half Britannia, like straight up, he's an 11. Plain and simple, that's what he is.
And he's the former prime minister's son, making him even more someone of more distrust.
Yeah. So the fact that she chose him as her personal guard throws a lot of confusion and anger towards her. He ends up like giving back the honor, like when he confesses and says like, I've never been punished for anything that happened to me. Like, this war is going on, and like I disobeyed orders. Like, I don't remember doing it, but I technically did. And I'm getting away with it. I killed my own father. Nothing ever happened to me. And, you know, people keep dying. 11s keep dying. Britannians keep dying. And I just get to keep walking away. I can't be your knight if that's what's going to go on. And she ends up like contemplating it for a while, and she ends up like telling you like I kind of love how she comes to the resolution because it's during this fight, and she ends up contacting him while he's there, and she's like, "I command you to love me." And I love his response because he's like, "Yes." Wait, what? It's just so much. They have such like a fun relationship, and it's really cute.
And you kind of fall for Euphemia too, like
yeah. But you also fall for her because you see her struggling with things and then come to the resolution of what she wants, which is to create a place where everyone can be happy. And the reality is, it's not just everyone, it's especially because she ends up finding out that Lelouch is still alive. She finds out Nonnally is still alive. Lelouch's little sister.
And they were very close.
And they were very close, but as far as the Britannia family is concerned, they're all dead. Like, she finds out and like, so she wants a place where Lelouch and Nonnally can be happy, but she also wants a place where everyone can smile and be happy.
Well, and a place where she can be with Suzaku. But she also wants to make a better place, which is where one of the few things where I'm like, having it's a special zone where you can call yourself Japanese. The Japanese wouldn't accept that. Like, most of them wouldn't. But it is like a gesture, and it's just like that, but it's still like a good thing, and she, like someone like her, as long as she's alive, you feel with her character type and her actions and who she has around her and her decision making, feels like it makes it believable that it could work because of her.
Well, the other thing is that, like, even if she wanted to eventually get to the point where Japan had its own freedom, you got to start somewhere. Like, that's the reality of it. Like, you can't just be like, hey, we're just going to make Japan free right away. It's like, no, let's start small and build from there. It's like the rebel groups in their own right. Like, you start small, build up. Like, it's Lelouch's Black Knights, just for peace, not war. And like, the unfortunate part is her own idealism is her ultimate downfall.
Yeah,
and it's so disheartening.
Yeah, around the very end of this season, she meets with Lelouch at Zero, and she knows it's Lelouch because on the island where Suzaku and Colin are trapped, she is also trapped with Lelouch because she tried to stop the bombing by putting herself in the middle of the fight. But the person who was in charge enough to be like, no, we're still going to blow it up.
Yep.
Because he's that pragmatic.
Yeah.
And he's an awesome character.
He's so much fun. And he gets so much better in the second season.
Yeah. Well, because you don't really see, he's barely characterized. But anyway. Yeah. And they have this really awesome talk. Again, it's like this contrasting philosophical discussion of Suzaku and Collins where... and it's just awesome how she basically dismantles his whole Zero personality.
Yeah.
And just makes him such a vulnerable person and creates like this little world of happiness and stuff in this little island that they're all trapped
in. Because as hardened as he is by hate and rage, she is still a soft, innocent person. Even though she's royalty, she's still pure. Like, she's not driven by the greed or the hatred that the rest of his family has. She's not driven for war. Like, she's a happy, kind of an airhead type person. She's just happy, and she wants others to be happy. And like that, someone that pure just like cuts through his Zero personality and his hatred. Like, and we see like the more that they keep talking, the more he keeps like. Because initially he's like, no, I'm still going to take down Britannia. I'm still going to, like, that first island meeting ultimately ends with him still wanting to be on the war front. But then they talk a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And at the end, when they meet for the last time, he's finally at that point is like, you know what?
Your way a shot.
I'll try your way. I'll try the way of peace instead of war.
And this is one of the few times because I'm not a sensitive person at all. I'm not a sensitive person at all. And when I say, especially at the time when I first saw this show over a decade ago, I believe.
Yeah.
It actually made me tear up a little because I was just like in love with her in the set as a character, and then also just how she was able to convince Lelouch and what she said. Even I, because I totally side with Lelouch. Like, burn it all down or bring it all down. I'm all for that, and I recognize his necessities for most of his actions and why he does what he does. And she was even, it made me go, I'm on your side.
Yeah,
she's
that kind of convincing.
And it's so good. And then Lelouch commands her, accidentally because he loses control of his Geass and accidentally commands her to kill all the Japanese people.
Yeah, because...
And then is forced to kill her. And Suzaku just goes crazy after that. And
he loses it.
He wants Lelouch because he knows Lelouch is Zero at this
point.
No?
No.
Oh, he doesn't know yet.
He doesn't know until the very end.
Yes.
Well, he doesn't officially know until there. Like, we find out he's suspected a little bit, but he gets confirmation at the very end.
But he
wants Zero dead.
And he's like, the way he fights is way more aggressive. He's way more angry. And they have those, like, unnecessary anime shots that look good in a manga but do not belong.
Yeah, where they show the nightmares and then they cut into the pilot.
Right.
And actually, what I like is at the final battle, like the reason Suzaku ends up at that is like his unit was actually told to stand down and not go. And he walks up to the Earl of Pudding and is like, I'm going, Zero's in Tokyo, I'm going to Tokyo. And the Earl of Pudding is like holding the key to the Lancelot saying, you can't go without this. He grabs the key, punches the Earl, and just takes the nightmare. And I love it because it's...
I mean, Earl doesn't even really care that he got punched in the face.
Well, because that's what the Earl wanted.
Yeah.
Like, the reality is the Earl wanted him there.
Yeah.
That's why he held the key out. Because the reality is he could have locked it in a safe and been like, oh, I lost it.
Yeah.
Like, there were a dozen different... Like, if he did not want Suzaku to go...
Give it to his assistant, tell her to drive away.
Yeah. Like, there were plenty of ways for him to make sure Suzaku didn't go. He said that, like... He didn't... I don't think he knew he was going to get punched in the face, but he definitely... Like, he wanted Suzaku to take the key. He wanted Suzaku to disobey orders. Because it was dumb to hold back the Lancelot, especially since at this point in the show, Zero, or Lelouch, has an extremely powerful nightmare of his own, which the Lancelot can fight against. It's the only nightmare that we know of at the time that can fight against.
Yeah, because the Lancelot is like the newest model of nightmare.
Yeah.
And Lelouch's is one of the only other ones in the entire show. It's basically the Gundams.
Yeah. Well, it's because Lelouch's is a prototype for the next model.
Yeah.
That they're working on. But yeah, I love that because it's the fun. It's Suzaku's breaking point, and it's a good breaking point. It's a good motivation for a breaking point, and it's now he's disobeying orders, and it makes sense. This isn't like Iron-Blooded Orphans who just lost it for no reason.
And we'll get back to that part once we talk about Lelouch.
Yeah, the final battle is really Lelouch's story.
Yeah, even though Suzaku plays a huge role, we'll get back to that. The next like major character of the whole show who doesn't get anywhere near enough screen time in this season, and she's one of my favorites, is Cornelia.
Yeah.
She is just an absolute badass.
She
pilots these nightmares that have actual lances and they like run people through, and she makes great decisions, outclasses Lelouch but for pretty much every fight until the final fight with Lelouch.
And that's really just because Lelouch got lucky.
Yeah.
Like, the reality is that Lelouch kind of got lucky. That's really the only reason he was able to outmaneuver her, is because they fell back to defend Tokyo, and he's like, Tokyo is built on plates. Or the outer rim of Tokyo is built on plates. I can collapse that. Like, that's really how he ends up outfoxing her. Like,
he had to anticipate that bit, though, because in order to
blow he'd
have to blow them all up simultaneously. That's a lot of bombs you got to set.
That is true.
Not like he shoots missiles like, Death Star down the porthole, we win.
Yes, that is true, but, like, had they not fallen back to Tokyo for the reason...
Well, he knew that because he had, at that point, he had basically built an army and had most of Japan under his control. So she had to consolidate all her forces and wait until reinforcements came, and then they would lose. Zero could not win just due to the reinforcements that they could muster.
Yeah, she's so much fun, and just how she outclasses him, too.
In the first fight that they have, she's able to attack with such ferocity, like cavalry, where she does such shocking maneuvers that it just shatters the morale, and they start disobeying Zero.
Yeah.
Because they're just rebels at this time, which is what leads him to one of his first progressions as a resistance leader. I love that, where how she just her shock and awe tactics, her use of her forces, how she surrounded them and outmaneuvered them and predicted maneuvers there. It's like clearly she's experienced in dealing with resistance forces.
Incompetent resistance forces at that.
Yeah, and she's also right on the front. She'll get in the thick of it and fight with all other characters that are awesome. Characters that are like her two. She has two main knights that are with her.
Yeah.
That are just insanely loyal to her. And she's smart enough to put Euphemia in charge. Like, there's so much about her that's just so awesome. And like how she knows that she can't, like there's a part where the Japanese Liberation Front takes over, the main core of it takes over this hotel that has that's for some reason on an island, and there's like one bridge going to it. And then
so what that is actually is there's a meeting about the Securite going on in that hotel, and Lelouch's school also has a field trip to there to like see, because the people that control the Securite and the people that trade with have meetings like once a year to determine like who's getting what shares, who's getting what, like it's basically renegotiations yearly. And it happened, like, of course, coincidentally, it happens the same time Lelouch's school has a, field trip there. And Euphemia is there, and, like, Cornelia finds that out and is like, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, so she won't just send troops in, but she does do, that's where the Earl Pudding is able to send in the Lancelot, who is clever enough to like break through the lines in a secret tunnel.
It's not clever, like it's skill.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Like he breaks through skill.
Yeah, because he's able to dodge shrapnel.
Because they set up this weird like this shrapnel cannon in this tunnel below, because it's a well-known tunnel. Like people know that tunnel exists. Of course,
the subway way, and there's the overhead land bridge, and then the subway into it. And but after that, apparently, like that still gets disrupted. But she's smart enough to not just like send in all the forces, because eventually the Lelouch Black Knights take credit for it. That's how they come out as the Black Knights. It's they stop the
because Zero shows up, and because he knows that Euphemia is also there, and Cornelia initially is like, why would we let you pass? Why don't we just kill you? You're going to join them. And he's like, do you really want to bet Euphemia's life on that? I can get her out of there. I can save her. You can take the credit. Like and she uses it, like she thinks she's using it. Like that's actually probably the one time before the final fight that Lelouch outsmarts her.
Yeah.
But
it just that how she's pragmatic.
The reality is the entire.
This is the whole reason I really bring that up in regards to her.
Well, I also like it because the part I like is the entire reason he gets to outsmart her there is because normally she's acting in a pragmatic way. Well, and at that time, she's acting in an emotional way because Euphemia is involved.
Well, and that's where Dietar actually also, they try and stop the broadcast so they can put the spin on. But he's like, no, and this before he's sworn joining the Black Knights. He's like, no, we're showing this. And so he basically forces the truth out when they do try and spin it on her end. So she gets kind of, where he takes the credit in front of everyone publicly, and she gets screwed over on that end too. But yeah, you're right. She's acting emotionally, so that's
it's part of the the reason why it's the only time up until the very, very end that he's able to outsmart her. Otherwise, every fight with her, like I think the one major fight ends up in a draw, but that's just because people ultimately because Suzaku shows up. Yeah, he eventually because up until then Lelouch happens to be on the winning side because it's the first fight with Toto, and then Lancelot shows up and makes that playing.
And that's what's really great about that fight is she's actually winning. Like everything that she does, all her maneuvers are perfect. It's just that her older brother interferes, and decides to blow up. Like, and she gets wounded because Lelouch's strategy, which is always his greatest weakness of Britannia, destroy the leader and the rest of them fall. It's a chess game.
Yeah.
And it's so even like, and he like exploits that so well and knocks her out. He doesn't kill her. He tries to, but he's ultimately prevented by her other defending knights, which he then recognizes he's got to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's how he's ultimately overcome them, even though it's kind of like she has more of a Pyrrhic victory than Lelouch wins.
Yeah.
And because then they do the things blow up and Euphemia and him and all that gets separated and it leads to the island event. And that's pretty much like then the last part, which we're just going to talk about in Lelouch's part when we get to that part of the story is at the very end of the show. Lelouch is the last major. He's the main character of the show.
He's definitely not the last. He's the very first.
He's the first character you meet. He's the main character. The show's name. It's Lelouch to the Rebellion.
Yeah.
He's just such like this charming character who just loves going to nobles and taking their money and defeating them at chess games. That's how you're first introduced to him.
Yeah.
And he's like doing dangerous things with it. Like that's a dangerous thing to be doing because they don't know who he is. And he knows like nobles are too proud to not pay up when he like gambles with them.
Well, yeah, because it would then go public that they lost to a student.
Yeah, and then he accidentally gets caught up in like the resistance attacking the Britannians, where Colin first gets her robot and all that stuff. And that's
her first nightmare, not the red one.
Yeah, first nightmare.
She ends up getting the red one because of him and due to the backing. Yeah.
But he like that's where he meets C2. She gives him the Geass. So I already explained that part. But like what he then does is there's all these guards there that are like asking they're pointing their guns at him. He just to test out his powers. He tells them all to kill themselves and they all blow their brains out.
Yeah.
And then a nightmare pilot shows up, which is the woman that
Ogi saves
later on because she's like out after Zero after this point because she figures out that somehow Zero manipulated her. But she's like, she points her gun like, "What are you doing here?" And then he's like, he tries to command her, but he realizes it doesn't work through the nightmares, which is really cool ways. The way they define his powers is so natural.
Yeah, and I love how he goes about testing it out too, because we find out he uses he uses Geass on a teacher to ask about the answers to an upcoming test, and then so one of the side effects of Geass is people don't remember what happened immediately before it. They don't remember what they did, and they don't remember the immediate moment after. So it allows them to give the command, them to respond, and then for him to potentially get away, step, or just stand.
It essentially rewrites their brain.
Yeah,
and it shows that's in the animation. It shows.
It's such a cool effect. I love it. It's so simple too. It's a very simple effect of all things. But I do love the effect.
Yeah, it just basically shows the electronic connections of the neurons shifting and changing, and the coloring and the lighting. It's really neat. And my favorite one though, that's a running thing throughout the entirety of the series, is second season 2, is he has this girl to test his power to see how long it lasts. Every day she goes up and makes a mark on the wall.
Yep.
And it shows that there's 15 of them at that point, but at the very end of the series, you always see her still marking on that wall.
Yeah.
I think there's a war battle. I'm sorry, but in the second season, I think
there's a battle going on, and she's
still doing
it. That's actually at the end of this season.
Oh really? Oh yeah, you're right.
That's cool. She still goes out and does it.
Yeah.
But what I love is the fact that there's things like that, figuring out what's the length of it. He figures out he has to have direct eye contact. Glasses are okay, but nothing out nothing too dark to obscure vision. He also finds out with the teacher, which I was starting to mention, is he can't use Geass on the same person twice because he uses the Geass once to ask about the questions, gets the answer, then attempts to use it again, and the teacher's like, "You should just study hard." So it's so much fun sort of watching how he's testing it. And we're not seeing every test he's done. Some of it we're figuring out based on conversations he has with C2. But it's so cool. And it's such a creative way to go, hey, here's a superpower. Well, of course he doesn't know how to use it. He just knows what it's called. Like, he knows he can give commands. That's it. Of course, he's not going to know what to do with that.
And then C2 just shows up and is like, we made a deal. And he tries to like hide her, get her to go away. And she...
That doesn't work very
Yeah,
well.
that's the one thing I love about her characterization. She's stubborn. She doesn't care. She's so aloof, but she's very serious all at the same time.
And orders a lot of pizza.
Yeah, she loves pizza. Like there's like halfway through it, they're making a giant pizza, and she's so excited and gets mad when she doesn't get some.
Yeah.
His first major action when he takes over is to destabilize Britannia in Area 11, and he goes after his brother, and like he murders his own brother, who's the viceroy, current viceroy of Area 11. Thank you. And after he does that, after he murders his brother and reveals and like he forces him to tell him all like who killed his mother, and he doesn't give him any proper information. After he murders him, he actually vomits. He actually regrets. It shows that he regrets his action. That's why it like makes that scene so characterizing for Lelouch himself.
Is the fact that he is, like, as much as he wants this war, as much as he wants to destabilize Britannia, as much as he wants to take out his family, it's also costing him.
Well, because he doesn't want to kill his siblings. He just recognizes they're a means to an end for his ultimate goal.
Which is to,
is to destroy Britannia and kill his father.
Yeah.
That's the worst looking guy. You see
you see him a couple of times. Like, he doesn't play a major role in this season. Like, we get a couple of snippets of him. The one thing I will say, like, probably my favorite snippet that involves him and Lelouch is we get a flashback of Lelouch when he was a child, and this is it's after Lelouch's mother died. He goes and confronts his father, and it's like, why aren't you looking? And Lelouch is probably like 5 or something at the time, like 5 or 6. He's very young at the time, and is, asking his father, why doesn't he visit? Like, why doesn't he care? Why isn't he looking into it?
And he's speaking for Nunnally mostly.
He's mostly speaking for Nunnally. And like, why don't you visit her? Like, she was injured, she can't, And I kind of love what he says right there. Like, as messed up as it is, I really enjoy it. Just because it sets up why he is Lelouch's ultimate enemy and ultimate like goal is because he's like, because you're not human. You're dead to me. Like, I feed you, I clothe you. Like, who provides for you? Who gave you your clothes? Who gives you your food? Who gave you your home? You provide nothing to me. Why would I care?
Oh yeah,
and like I said, it's that is terrible parenting.
His speeches
but
are so megalomaniacal. I love it. That's
what I love about him. He's a megalomaniac, and it's every time we see, like, especially when he gets on like long speeches, because sometimes we see him and he says like 3 words and then he cuts away. But there's
a speech where he gives a very prejudice-based speech about how how nobles in Britannia are superior to everyone else.
Yeah, because no one is born equal. That statement is a farce. It's he's such a great like hidden bad guy almost, because he's the ultimate goal. Like, he's the ultimate big bad, but he really plays no part in this ever. Like, the couple of times he does show up, he's like, I don't care. I guess send one of my kids. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, he hears about it. Like, the one time he actually cares about what's going on in Area 11 is when Lelouch loses control of his Geass. His father is aware of it, and it's the first time you see his father really get excited about something, and is like, oh yes, finally I forget his exact line, but it's like, you're finally ready to be my heir or something like that. So, like, he's been waiting for this, and I love him as the ultimate bad guy.
That's all that really is for his dad. But Lelouch, like that's like the best part of him, is you see like how he has to balance his like hidden life from at first, where he's living this double life where he's the leader of resistance and he's like this high school student who is taking care of his little sister, and he realizes he needs to find someone to take care of him. He tries to choose Saku.
Ultimately isn't going to work.
Euphemia makes him a knight and screws that up. And then as he gets more and more organized, he just keeps making all these awesome decisions that we've discussed already. But I love at the very end Well, sorry, like not, but like 3/4 of the way through, he eventually steals this giant or this nightmare called the Galahad, which I love how there's all these references to Arthurian lore.
Yes.
And this robot can fly. It looks amazing. I love the look of the Galahad, and then it has death beams that just annihilate and melt everything.
Well, what I also love is it's also like outside of the Arthurian lore, it's also a reference to like the Black Knights, the White Knight, like Suzaku's Lancelot is white with it does have accenting colors, but it's the White Knight, and the Galahad is a black nightmare. So it's not only like these Arthurian like references to lore, but also these like white and black chess pieces moving. It's just I love these little like detail things that tie into who people are as characters. Because like Suzaku piloting the Lancelot makes sense. He's an honorable type of person. He cares. Lelouch piloting because it's not just Lelouch that has to pilot it. It's also C2. Galahad is the only nightmare unit we've ever seen that requires 2 pilots to make full use of it.
Very convenient 2 pilots.
Yes. Because
that way C2 can always be there to yell at him and tell him stuff.
She almost never yells.
She's constantly yelling at him. She's such a horrible.
No, she's not yelling at him. She's just prodding him and going, "You have a deal to make. This is what you wanted. Like, don't cop out." Like, she's not yelling at him. She never raises her voice, or she just prods him.
When he tries to like muscle her around, she does tell him off.
Yeah, but she never yells. Like that's the thing. She always keeps herself composed. The only time she loses it is when he ends up like because she's trying to mess with Suzaku, because she can't have Lelouch die, you know. So she's projecting mental images into Suzaku while he's piloting the Lancelot, and Lelouch is like, I can't have you can't be here, and touches her and like gets flooded with her memories. That's the only time she really gets emotional to him.
Well, because now he knows like her pain, and she probably had to experience it too, which is really cool because you get to see her get burned at the stake and shot in the head.
Yeah,
and it's just flashes. Like you don't see anything but those little details, and you have to watch that a couple times to really get all the details. We're watching slow mo.
Yeah.
And then, but after all the really clever stuff that Lelouch does, like there's only one little small part there. He meets, which is like the only reason I need to mention this is because he meets someone else who has a Geass that C2 had previously been with, and it shows like both characterizes C2 and shows a potential future for Lelouch.
Yeah.
There's this character who has a Geass, but he can read minds, but he has no control over it. Anyone around him, he can just read their mind depending on how he focuses. And just how, and he's just obsessed with C2 because she was basically his mother. She found him as a little kid, made a deal with him, and now he's just obsessed with her.
It's also because
she can't read her mind.
Yes, because we find out none of the Geass does not work on C2. So his mind reading doesn't work on C2. Lelouch's command Geass does not work on C2. Like Geass does not work on her. So that's also part of his obsession with her is because around her, especially when they were alone and away from people, it was just quiet. Which if you're flooded with everyone's thoughts all the time, nonstop, and you can't turn it off,
you're gonna go crazy.
You're gonna go crazy, which he absolutely loses it. Like he's like his ultimate thing, like when he finally, like the first time he loses is, I bought us a villa in Australia, but you're too big to get on a plane, so I'm gonna cut you into pieces and transport you there. Like that's his idea of like
cool, because that way she can't run away. He's gonna cut off her arms and legs, make her a human potato. Yeah, just because he just wants to be around her. But he knows she's going to run away, which just shows like what C2 is about and how Lelouch ultimately solves it, and defeats him. But that's not really what's important.
No.
But at the very to like jump to the end of the show because we already talked about like everything else that's really important. Just kind of because Lelouch is the focal point of the entire show. Everything
Yeah, like
involves
the
him.
reality is we couldn't talk about everyone else without talking about him.
But the end of the show is probably one of the few times I didn't get mad at this action they did. Because Suzaku and Lelouch finds out that someone has kidnapped Nunnally, his little sister, who's wheelchair bound and blind.
Yeah, it's also not only is also his driving force behind everything he's doing. The entire reason he wants to take down Britannia is for Nunnally. The reason he's trying to live this double life is for Nunnally. Like everything is for her like to get. He thinks it's for her happiness, when in reality she has multiple times stated that for her to be happy, she just wants to be with her brother.
Yeah.
Like the reality is to make her happy, he has to do none of this.
Yeah, well, but he's also driven by revenge for his mother and trying to figure out why his mother was murdered. And when then him and Suzaku chases Lelouch down, and they end up in this weird.
So that weird thing is actually on the island that they were in the midpoint when he got the Galahad. Like that island has a ancient sort of
magic doorway thing. They mention it in the episode where they're on the island because they just find it, and that's why they say the Empire's really expanding. Is not to take land, but to find these magic artifacts, these magic places.
Yeah.
And that's all the mention you get. It's revealed in season 2. But Lelouch and Suzaku like confront each other, and Suzaku's like, "I'm going to kill you," and he's like, "We need to work together to save Nunnally. When we work together, and when we never fail." But Suzaku wants to like work with him, but he's so mad about Euphemia's murder that he shoots him right in the head and cracks Zero's helmet off, which is like so silly in a way.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Like, he cracks the helmet, then they have that confronting conversation about we need to save Nunnally.
Because he finds a Zero as Lelouch, for sure.
But that's really when they have that conversation about saving Nunnally and the fact that if they work together, they can, accomplish anything. And I also like outside of the fact that just what, Lelouch did to Euphemia, it's also what Lelouch has kind of done to everybody is
created chaos, and a lot of people have died.
Chaos, a lot of people have died, and all he's done to everybody is constantly lie. Because it also turns out Colin is also there because she chased down Suzaku because Suzaku was chasing Lelouch and yada yada yada. But she's there, so it breaks her to see that Zero is Lelouch. Like, she immediately is like, "What? How? But how are you? Why? Huh?" Like, she's completely stunned by the whole thing, and Suzaku's like, "Yeah, see, like he doesn't care about the Japanese, he doesn't care about the 11s. Like, he's just using you all. Like, he's constantly killed your people time and time again."
And then you hear a gunshot and cut to black.
No, it cuts to black, and then you hear the gunshot.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, it cuts to black, then you hear a gunshot. And it's one of the few times where I'm like, you ruined the movie. You fucked it up. You ruined it. You totally ruined the movie. Or the TV show, or there's so many stuff where they cut to black, and it's just lazy writing to get out of having to actually end it. To where this is more of like that bait, that like, come see, you gotta see the end of the story, see the end of the story.
Come see season 2.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And it works. Like, it works. Like, I honestly, like, when I watched this final episode for season 1, I immediately watched episode 1 of season 2.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize.
And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, yes, next episode. I got through the whole episode before I realized I should probably wait because I'm going to spoil everything about this if I keep going.
This is one of the few shows where it is so easy to binge watch for me. I can watch it through, and there is,
26 episodes for
season
1, I believe. And
so it's 52 episodes, or is it 24? Well, ultimately, it's so easy to watch the whole series.
Yeah, it's around 50
episodes. Spent entire days. I mean, I don't have the time anymore being a father, but to where I can just sit down and watch the entire show in one sitting.
But you do, because you need to show your child the show.
Yeah, when she's like 10, 15, I don't know. And hopefully she likes it anyway. Anyway, the one thing I really wish I like, having watched the show this time around, I like a lot of the emotional impacts because I wasn't surprised by everything. Makes me really wish I could watch the show again for the first time, truly, because that was one of the most powerful parts. Like when Euphemia gets killed, and her, like, and all that stuff that happened, all the little surprises, twists, and turns, and like who is this character, all that stuff. Would you mind rewriting and giving me the command to forget everything I saw in Code Geass so I can go back and watch the whole show for the first time?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Why?
Iron-blooded orphans.
Knew there was a reason why I agreed to watch that show.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go work on my giant robot.
Fair enough. In the name of Panda Head, I command you to let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And while you're there, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon.
If you're interested in joining us gaming, check us out on Twitch. And for updates, follow us on Twitter. The links are in the description down below.